Welcome back, Marvels. Dana and I, right before hitting the record button, we're talking about situational impairment. And I said to Dana, is it situational impairment, though, if it happens to me all the time?
Yeah. It's just always the situation. Yeah.
It's
More
always
grist
the
for the
situation.
blooper reel that we still have to put together. Yeah.
Hey, Marvels, welcome back. We hope that this episode finds you well.
Yeah.
Whatever that means to you, but well, So Dana and I, we like to talk about things that we see or we hear. And something that has not only, I think, been in the social kind of media kind of places, right? But I was talking to Dana about how a lot of my colleagues are still using the high functioning, low functioning labels.
Yeah.
And understanding why they want to use high functioning, low functioning labels, because they want to give me information. But I think the problem that we're having with this one is it's not really descriptive in and of itself. And what exactly is the functioning? Like,
Yeah.
do you just mean intelligence or cognition? And then if not, or if so, how did you measure that? Is that just because they can speak?
Yeah.
So it gets
I think
really
there's a lot
complicated.
of there's a lot of oppression possibilities in there, and I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
implicit bias that when
Yep.
typically when people hear low functioning, they think there's an intelligence, there's cognitive impairment, right? Low IQ.
Yep.
And when people hear high functioning, they think the other end of the stereotype, which is like a savant kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And yeah, that there's a reason the DSM got rid of those labels, and the ones they put in place aren't perfect either, where we have 3 different levels of support needs. I mean, they have a descriptor of what those support needs are, but the criticism is support needs can vary day to day. They certainly vary through the lifespan, right? We would expect a kid who doesn't have a fully formed brain yet to maybe have more support needs than an adult, or maybe the adult needs more support needs because they're now expected to be autonomous and hold a job and things like that. So anytime you start putting descriptors on someone around functioning, I mean, I've always thought that even with things like depression or anxiety or PTSD, or when we're giving those labels, you're automatically sort of putting a pin in someone, and now there isn't room for them to vary from that in terms of your description. But I agree with you. People that don't know autism well really still use those marginalizing labels. And I find that too, if I'll say, saying high functioning really isn't okay. And they'll kind of look at me like, really? I'm like, it's just sort of the same thing. And maybe we'll do another episode on it. But what I get when I had to correct people that I work with at a meeting a couple weeks ago about using the phrase special needs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is something that is really dying out of favor because of what any term we give with time is probably going to become marginalized because, a new term, people don't have the negative associations with it. And then over time that happens. And that came into be with people with good intentions, right? Let's get away from the R word and let's try to, say that they have needs, and they have needs that are different than we're used to giving in case special needs. But we all know what that connotates now. And I think that's the same thing with high and low functioning. It sort of brings up those ideas right away, right? Those negative labels.
Yeah, and I think like if I think about like kind of why it might be oppressive or functionally how it might be marginalizing, I think about the presumption of competence, right? Where this idea of we don't presume that a person is competent, meaning what do I mean by that, right? That the person is able to be active in their life, to make decisions in their life, to want to make decisions in their life, understands what's happening around them, that they have these kind of basic rights and that we need to treat them in this way. And I will say in my work with all of or I will say most of my non-speakers, they have always said to me, thank you. Like, thank you for just talking to me like you think I understand, because I do. I
Mhm.
have a
Yeah.
very difficult time communicating,
Yep.
but just talk to me normally. Like
Yeah.
they've really appreciated that. But I think what happens when we presume that someone is quote unquote low functioning or special
Mhm.
needs, or we don't presume that they're competent,
Right.
what happens is we reduce the meaningful opportunities that we give that person,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
then they don't get to have opportunities that lead to fulfillment and
Yeah.
growth and well-being, and
Yeah.
that is an issue. And again, I know that there's probably some people out there who are like, oh yeah, so then just everybody is smart and everybody, so we
Mm,
just
mm,
and
mm.
it's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really the ability to say, we struggle with labels, and labels are we
Yeah.
try to have labels because we try to communicate.
Right.
And even today, just saying I'm autistic, let's just
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
that isn't even really comprehensive in regards to
Oh,
how
yeah.
the
Yeah.
person's profile is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we used to have this thing called, the GAF score, which was the Global Assessment of Functioning, but that was
Yeah.
like a single number, and you tried to guess, like, on any given
Oh
day,
my god.
where does this person function? It's like,
Thanks for
well, I'm
dating
not.
us. Thanks
Yeah,
for
yeah,
dating
I'm
us,
not
Dana. I was
following
like, "Oh
these.
my god, you just took out a gaff. Are you like what?" I'm like, "Oh yeah.
Right,
Oh,
right,
I
right,
gaff."
right.
I remember gaffing
Yeah.
someone at like 52 and
Yeah.
being like, "Why are they even I'm
Oh.
walking." Anyway, sorry, go ahead. Go back.
Yeah, and it was that same thing. You assign them a single number, and it was like, how can you assign a single number? Because all of us could have meltdowns on any given day or whatever. Can't go to work. Whatever. I didn't go to work once because I had tipped the color on my own hair, and I'd gotten too much on the back where it was all short, and I had this big blob of blonde hair, and I called in sick. I told everybody I was sick, but I was really going to the salon to get it fixed because I was like, I was freaking out. Right, I wasn't functioning very well that day. So,
Yeah.
it's a silly example, but it's meant to be sort of illustrative of these are kind of moving targets. And what I learned in my Adlerian training was to never sort of try to describe someone in a single, we call them specifiers. It's to give a
Yeah.
descriptive piece of them. And then also understand, I like to look at things like bandwidth, people can
Yeah.
understand that. And then give a descriptor of, yes, this person maybe has these sensory sensitivities that they're more apt to run into out in the world. And that may take spoons away or whatever, thing
Yeah.
is helpful for you to understand. And that may make them more apt for X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't mean they're quote low functioning. And then we're into that equity of supports kind of thing. Why can't we give those things to folks so that they're not having spoons ripped away from them so they can do these other things and so on, right?
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
the
And
whole idea
yeah.
of cognitive impairment, just so people know, that is a separate thing. I mean, it's even a separate thing for autism or ADHD. You can say with cognitive impairment, and then what you started out with is how do you assess that? How do you judge that? There's all kinds of testing you can do to not just see if someone's cognitively impaired, like a neuropsych assessment, but how that impairment specifically might operate. So even blanketly saying someone's cognitively impaired, it might mean their processing speed is slow. It might
Yep.
mean, second order coding might be slow. It might be that their verbal comprehension takes longer. There's all kinds of their working memory might be an issue. Their long-term memory. There's all these things that go into, people don't realize it goes into cognitive functioning. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we're not trying to dilute the label and just say, well, everybody's fine. We're really sort of trying to preach home accuracy of descriptions rather than labels, right? And then
Yeah.
whenever I write a report for someone who's neurodivergent, I really do try to put that in that context, right? And you brought up the concept of masking beforehand, and I think the better someone masks, the more they're apt to have an assessor say, "Oh yeah, you don't need supports," when
Yeah.
really they're just gotten really good at masking, right? And people will talk
And
about when they start to unmask, they feel like they're not as competent, and that happens, right?
And that is, I mean, I love the idea of bandwidth, Dana, because I think most
Hmm.
people understand the concept of bandwidth, or the fact that, there's only so much energy, or there's a limited amount of resources that
Right.
we have access to, and that everybody taps into their resources differently, right?
Hmm.
Different things might be energy kind of takers, versus like the
Yeah.
givers. But Um, I think, the other thing with high functioning, it's so funny because it's very common in my practice where the word high functioning has replaced like Asperger's, right? Like
Oh,
that kind of
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's, I don't know. Like I have had multiple students at Caltech who are Fulbright scholars
Mhm,
they are the top 1% cognitively in the nation.
mm,
They can't get to class. They can't wake up on
mhm.
their own. They can't feed
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah,
They shut down. I mean, I'm not sure what and this is the challenge, right? Is
yeah,
that high functioning then?
yeah,
Because maybe someone that has less IQ, I'm putting up
right.
my air quotes, but can wake up and take care of themselves for the entire day? Is that
Yeah,
more like
yeah,
like but
yeah.
this is a thing, so,
I wish I had
so
someone to tend to all of my needs like that, and then, of course, I would function better. I mean, the first thing that popped in my mind is stories about Einstein, who everybody associates with someone as being very smart. His wife did everything for him, right? I mean, so these folks that are in these privilege categories and start to get hooked into privilege categories get a lot more support, and of course, they sort of excel, right? And the
yeah,
idea is who gets marginalized and who doesn't get those supports. And then you get into the whole thing that you're having to deal with the school. It needs a label to get a support of some kind. And then you're into that whole game of labeling someone, and now people are going to see them a certain way. And it just is
right.
maddening. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or fighting for the label because they're not disabled
Yeah.
enough on the outside, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
another, and I feel like here, I mean, this is why we use the social disability model,
Hmm.
that the level or the how impacted you are by your disability is directly related to how much support you're getting or
That's right.
how much your community has accommodated your disability.
Yeah.
So, and we see this. I mean, this is
Yeah.
not a made up thing, and it's kind of what Dana's talking about, right? Dana, like
Yeah.
how disabled, quote unquote, you look has
Yeah.
everything to do with the amount of supports and the
Yeah.
amount of accommodations your community is providing for you and
That's right.
access that it provides for you. So,
Yeah.
um, so maybe what we can do is task our audience with like, what are some of the other alternative words that you use to describe what we are trying to move away from this? We were trying to move away
Hmm.
from high functioning, low functioning.
Hmm.
How do you describe it? How do you think about it? I would love to see some ideas on that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm thinking about the moving target thing. So, like, when I had my thumb surgery, my brain is starting to get used to it now. But when the first week or so, everything I did was like took like 3 times as long because I literally didn't have like the motor memory of how to move. And so, if you think about something like that, and that someone who is neurodivergent, that's our lives every day. Right. And so that to have those functional labels, it's sort of like, well, you and I will say this sometimes when we log in, I feel discombobulated today. Everybody can sort of yoke with that term. And
Mm.
that can happen all the time, every day. And for some of us, in a certain situation, a very small accommodation makes all the difference in the world. And again, I don't say, "Oh, I'm high functioning," right? It's in that particular day with that particular help, I can, sort of do things seamlessly and not look autistic. And then there's other days where it doesn't matter what happens, it's just not going to go well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And this is why we stay away from curing autism because
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
disease,
It's a
right?
neurological way of being wired. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah. So that's why
Yeah.
it's always funny to me when someone loses their diagnosis because I'm like, what
Oh, what
happened?
happened there?
What happened? Maybe we should talk about that in a separate
Ding.
episode.
You're okay. Yeah, yeah. Hey, I want some of
Congratulations.
that.
Congratulations. Okay.
Yeah,
All right, you guys. So thanks for being here. And again, if you've got an opinion on this high functioning, low
yeah,
functioning
yeah,
kind of label or some replacements that we can help our community with, I mean, I would be most grateful for that. But
yeah, yeah, let
anyway,
us
we
know your
will see
thoughts.
you. Absolutely. We'll see you in the next episode. Be good to you. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.